Safety balance. It's not often we talk about subjects. Well, firstly, welcome to the podcast. But with our next guest, it's not often we talk about, sports that aren't running. We do sometimes when we think there's an amazing story. And Roald was suggested to us as a potential guest by one of the listeners. If you don't know about Roald, his background, he's basically overcome a huge amount to go to the Olympics in the javelin. I thought it'd be amazing to hear about the javelin just as much as his backstory. But welcome on the podcast, the wonderful Roald Bradstock.
Hooray!
Thank you.
My pleasure. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Trying to stay cool here in nice, cool Atlanta in the USA.
How come you've ended up in Atlanta then? Because that is certainly not an Atlantan accent.
No, I've actually been in the US now since 1981. I got offered a scholarship over at in the Southern Methodist University in Dallas. So at that time, there's only in England there's Loughborough and Borough Road, and neither one had an arts program. I really wanted to pursue art. So when the opportunity came up, and it was all expenses paid, it was a full scholarship. So I could train full time and pursue my art and start getting my art education.
Is that your art behind you?
Yes, it is.
Oh, amazing! Oh, so can people go on and buy your art online, or are these for sale?
Oh yeah, at roaldbradstock.com, on your website now. So I'm actually now, I was in the 84 and 88 Olympics and alternates, and 92 and alternate for the US and then 96. But then in 2000, I was actually a Olympic artist for the US, and then again in 2018, I was actually lead artist for the IOC in Pyeongchang, the arts program at the Winter Olympics, and I'm now on the Olympic Cultural and Heritage Commission. I'm also the chair of the World Olympians Arts Committee and head of an organization called Arts Olympians.
I mean, I didn't know any of those roles actually existed. So we're going to add that to the list of like 4 things I already want to talk to you about. And the first one, you mentioned how about Loughborough and was it Borough Road?
Yeah.
Where's Borough Road? I've not heard of that being referenced as like a sports excellence centre.
Well, no, they changed the name now to what's it called? I don't know. It's in London. It has a big. I don't know.
And was it a university where you could study potentially?
I'm sorry, say again.
Is it a university you could study at then?
Yes.
So maybe it's London Metropolitan or something similar. Interesting. Okay. So why don't you explain about, I guess, the early impact of your disability on your life and that beginning into javelin?
Well, really, it was the. This was back in 1968 when I was a young 6-year-old, and I was diagnosed with Spina Bifida. My mother noticed that my head was growing at an enormous rate, about an inch a week in circumference, and in a period of like 6 weeks, my 6-inch increase in my head was something very unusual. So she took me into the doctor, had these X-rays and all these tests, and they found out I had spina bifida and hydrocephalitis, which usually goes hand in hand. And from that point on, about every 3 to 6 months, I'd actually have to go into hospital and be measured and have all these tests, and kind of I didn't know how serious it was, but it was right around the same time. I don't know if it was before or after. I was watching the Mexico Olympics, a little black and white TV, and I remember I was just absolutely enthralled. It was actually Ron Pickering, his first BBC commentating job. I didn't know that at the time. He lived about a quarter mile from me. I got to meet him years later, but it was from that point on that I knew I wanted to be an Olympian, and I'm the kind of person that just when you tell me I can't do something, that's more reason to do it.
And what kind of how understood was spina bifida at the time, and what were the issues around it?
I don't know. I mean, my mother was a nurse, which is why she noticed it, and also my mother. So, and what she noticed was me just constantly slumping forward, kind of stretching my neck out. Obviously, if my head's growing that rate, then it's a dramatic increase in weight too. But what I didn't realize was so much later that I found out, I think, really in my 80s. I mean, 1980s. I was in my 20s. That there's a potential that I could have actually had to died or had to have a shunt put in to alleviate the pressure. Sometimes that happens when you stop growing around 17, 18. But yeah, I mean, apart from that, I really didn't know, and it didn't really affect me, other than I wasn't allowed to play any contact sports like rugby. I started swimming, and I always liked throwing things, so I just I picked up a javelin, a javelin proper, 1973. I could throw further than anyone else. I think some of the records, school and district records, actually still stand today.
Wow! So that was just natural talent.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it's like a sprinter, right? You have to have fast legs, and then you kind of train to kind of get that little extra to be a javelin thrower. I mean, you have to have a fast arm, and then you kind of work from there. And the irony is that kind of to become a really good javelin thrower, you have to learn how not to use your arm and use the rest of the body, and the arm will come in by itself. And that's really, I think, the hardest thing for athletes, and following my craft is how do you do that.
And do you think spina bifida in some ways helped in any way, or was it always a hindrance?
Well, it didn't help, but I think that again, now looking back, now in my 60s, looking back at why do I still throw? I mean, there's no financial benefit to it, and just the kind of and I think really going back to being diagnosed and being creative and being stubborn. And I think that my personality, it just motivated me to push harder, and just I push boundaries, I push buttons, I challenge myself, but I challenge other people, and just in what you see, what you think you see, and I think that what I did, it made me really tap into my creative juices as far as how do I reach my full potential, given these limitations. And again, so I mean, the way I throw is very unorthodox, and basically the idea behind it was, as opposed to just running up really fast and hitting it, and throwing as hard as I could, I come up slow, I wrap. It's kind of like a cross between like a discus throw and a golf swing. What I'm doing is basically increasing the range, the pull. So that what I'm doing is basically diffusing the impact on my spine. I mean the other part of it. I mean, I'm trying to get as long a pull as I can to generate as much power as I can for as long as I can. And the flip side of that is it also reduces the stress on my spine.
And if you were to, for people listening at home who maybe haven't thought about running or other sports they're involved in a creative way, like what would you recommend? How would you recommend they actually become more creative? Particularly in relation to sport, like is there something they should be an approach, or and with you, or if people have kids where they don't necessarily see the link between sport and art, what are we trying to move towards?
Well, I think it's just that, I think that the kind of work backwards here. So I think that the thing you should really avoid is the idea that we have all the answers, and we're not going to get any better, than running 10 seconds, 100 meters, or 4 minutes for a mile. That these barriers cannot be broken, right? Where it's and to me, it's the best coach or the best mindset you should have going into it as it is, to be open to ideas and look around and see, understand that there's more than one way to skin a cat, right? Where it's kind of there's not one set way. I think it's just you've got to look at your body type, whether it's the height, whatever. I mean, again, depending on the sport, obviously look at the best and kind of see what they do in their discipline, how they train. But then also, in your training, be very critical, right? And really think about. It's very easy to not really think, just be kind of mindless, or just to me, I want to know why I'm doing something, or just kind of I don't care what it is, whether it's how I walk, how I just whatever. It's a kind of, could I do this better? I mean, there's this, again, working backwards is, my objective as an athlete in my event is, to throw a javelin as far as I can. So work backwards from there, and then how do I prioritize everything I do in my training? From what percentage of weights do I do? What kind of exercises do I do in my weight session? How much stretching? What's the percentage of each? My diet. Which one has the highest impact on my throw? And work backwards from there, and just kind of use creativity that way. But it's just but you have to be on alert. The fact that your body will get so used to what you're doing, and it just become very comfortable, and you want to do the kind of same exercises you like doing and that you're good at. And again, like what are your weaknesses? And it's being that really critical of yourself. Again, I'm an artist, so I'm looking at the painting. All I'm doing the entire time of creating something is figuring out, here's what I want it at the end, and what's wrong with it, and how do I get there? And understanding that it's just the, to improve. It's not just positives, but it's also the negatives, right? Where it's just the kind of, understanding what's hurting you, and maximize, and just. So again, it's all about perspective. You just come down to it.
And have you found, because you've been incredible, the fact you've managed to take part in 7 different Olympic trials, even at the age of it's 8, wow. Yeah. And even in the even at the age of 50, have you found that how you've had to train has changed significantly in that time, and what do you put it down to, the fact that you've been at such a high level for such a long time?
Well, I think it's just I think what it comes down then is things we can measure, right? Tangibles. But to me, it's those intangibles. I mean, how do you measure passion? How do you measure drive? How do you measure, stubbornness? Right? And to me, it's just it's always been about me. It's been about the Olympics, and it's about me against the tape measure. And no one sets out, as a young kid, a teenager, whatever. I want to be a masters thrower. I want to be a masters athlete, competing when I'm 50, 60. No one does that. It just kind of happens by default. I mean, I didn't plan this. But again, I think to me, it's the reason I'm still doing it, because I enjoy doing it. I can. But that's not by accident. To me, it's taken a lot of work, and the fact that consistency. I've never stopped, even though, 2012, 2017, I stopped competing for 5 years. But I still went to the track. I still competed. Still was training. but I think that to answer your question about I always put, again, going back to my first major coach, Dave Cobb, was that running, that conditioning, the cardio, being fit. And I think with getting out of the throwers, I mean, javelin is the one that actually requires a little bit of running, albeit, only a few steps. But, going back to 2012, I came second at the British trials. And I was kind of stunned by how out of shape these young lads were. They were like, after the competition, they were laying around with ice bags and like they could be on through a battle. And they're 19, 18, 19, 20, early 20s. The next oldest guy to me was a guy who won it, who was, I think, 27. And there I am. I came second. I'm walking out. I'm met often afterwards, and they're buying me drinks at the bar. I'm perfectly fine. I mean, it was cold, but but to me, it just goes back to basics. It's not rocket science. I think a lot of times we overthink everything to the minutiae and get so lost in the big picture. And to me, that's where, again, prioritize. If you're a sprinter, a distance runner, a thrower, jumper, whatever. So kind of, what is your goal as an athlete? And then work backwards from there and in your training. But to me, it goes what underpins that is you've got to be fit and you've got to be healthy. And as you get older, there's less wiggle room. And it's just and you have to again also embrace the fact you've got to start modifying the way you train. And it's the hardest part, quite honestly. It's the hardest the training is. It's the mental aspect, because imagine, let me get kind of example as far as imagine working right, and you work hard, and you start getting paid less and less. It takes away the motivation, right?
Yeah.
And especially when you used to. So to me, it's that mindset of how the hell do you stay motivated, knowing that you're training to get worse, and there's no way around that. So it's just a kind of, so it's anyone who thinks that whether me or any masters athlete is going out there out of just pure ego to just the kind of, you got to be kidding me. I mean, to me, it's a very different, a very humbling experience, and I think a lot of masters, they do it for the social aspect. I'm more just, again, do it for myself, and kind of, I'm against the tape measure, and I'm looking at the record books. I'm comparing apples to apples as far as, with masters, they have, 5-year age groups. So I can look at, at the events and see at 60, at 65, I can see what's going to happen to me. And if I carry on doing this, and it's really demoralizing. It's like, I'm going to get that bad. But if I can still break world records and kind of, I'm going after world records. Look at it as it's still. But there's fewer and fewer people. It's a smaller and smaller group. If you thought there's javelin throwing is a small group to start with, it gets really small the older you get, and it's just.
And were they all, because in running we found the people who are better, older age, are nearly all late starters and kind of 10 years into running. Like, is that, do you get a lot of people, are there people coming into the javelin at an older age, or are most people established javeliners who continued?
No, it means, exactly to your point, it's very rare that you have athletes that were world record holders, Olympians, that carry on throwing, because basically what happens is your body's so beaten up and in any of the events, but also you just, if you've gone, if you're climbing Mount Everest and you're at your peak, and just to then going and walking, little molehills, it was just a kind of, does that make sense? It was just a kind of motivation takes away. But in my event, most javelin throwers don't make it to international, barely make it to their 30s. You end up usually, it's usually your elbow, your shoulder, or your knees, or just, intensity is just it's insane, and it's just but what I found in my experience is that you just throwers that used to throw in high school, maybe college, and they took a break and then maybe came back and they started throwing later. But they used to. Most of them, I think, have had some background when they were younger. They don't just come into completely without any background. But yeah, and it's also, I look at we just had the World Masters last week, and you notice that the throwers that are doing well or winning are getting smaller. So it's basically, again, people that are lighter, people that are fitter, which makes sense. We start throwing a lighter javelin. You don't need that mass. You don't need the bulk. You've also got to be able to move, and you start losing that elasticity, and just kind of. So again, it's I've changed some things in my technique, but also, I mean, to me, I'm very much about rhythm, and it's all about timing. And it's just but it's just as a friend of mine said recently, he's like, there's no way to throw a javelin slowly. Well, there is, but you won't throw it anywhere. But just, I mean, it's something that's a stretch reflex, and it's all dynamic. And as you get older, I mean, we have, I mean, you can still hit your peak strength, I mean, into your 40s. But the speed's the thing that you start losing, and again, it gets magnified. In an event where you're running up, it involves running, kind of bounding, twisting, stretching, and throwing. But I'm still here, but every day I go out, I can do it, and I never know if that's going to be the last.
And just going back to when you were at the UK Champs and came second in the bar, what did the other throwers make of you? What was going through their head, do you think?
I think disbelief, or just
because that's going to be pretty humbling from their point of view.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But again, I mean, I've gone through it now, so I've been asked, during a national. This was at the US Nationals, so this was 20 years ago. I was 40. Okay, I was asked during the competition. It came out to the middle of the field, and I was asked to leave. Coaches were not allowed to be in the field, and I was sitting next to the national coach. All the other javelin throwers are just roaring with laughter, and I'm trying to explain to them I'm an athlete, and then they call my name up, and I said, "Well, can I take my throw first before you kick me off?" So I threw, and then it came back, and they'd gone. But that went then from Olympic trials in 2008, where I was trying to get my accreditation, and this was in the US again, and they told me I had to go somewhere else, and they told me here because this is only for athletes. And then in 2012 in Birmingham, I was with my wife, and now I'm going through the whole thing, over there. And I just told my wife, I said, this is what I go through. It's just like how kind of, it's to the point now, it's I don't take it personally. And
do you quite enjoy it? Do you quite enjoy it when it happens?
I wouldn't say I enjoy it. It's just, to me, it amuses me. But anyway, so I'm with my wife, and then I go and look at me, and they say, and my wife stops and she goes, "Don't tell him." The coach goes, "Came in with his javelins, doing this. I would have liked her to be quiet and just let them kind of go down the path before I said anything. But then some other people went and goes, "No, that's who that is, right?" And they go, "No." All right. But when my wife and I first got together, this is 2007. She used to sit up in the stands, and it'll be they go, "Oh, here comes Grandpa's up next," or Yoda. Say, "Oh, Yoda's throwing." I'm like, "Yoda? Wait, that's the wrinkly guy." I'm like, "Okay." I looked in the line, going, "Okay, that's kind of funny," but now it's gone to the point of not only am I, obviously older than the athletes, but I'm older than the parents. Well, now, I mean, this year, now 60, going after another world age record. I'm now hanging out with the coaches afterwards who are in their 60s. And they're loving it, and just because they like, especially when we break records and stuff. But so it's a very interesting journey. But it was, again, at the last meet I went to, I was stopped at every gate. They wouldn't, even though I carried my javelins, they said, no, you need this. I'm one of the athletes. And then they came over an speaker that I was throwing, and just, I just said, I just showed them my driver's license. That's me, the one they're talking about. And they come back 5 minutes later and they stop me again. It's just, it is what it is. And to me, it's that I understand what I'm doing is something very different. I don't expect people to understand. And if they don't know who I am, it's like kind of, they don't take it personally, but it's just kind of my journey. And just having fun with it. Like I said, I can still go to these meets and I can still enjoy it, but I mean, it is getting harder. And, and again, the motivation's still there. I broke the British over 60s record 4 times, but I just missed the age record. So now I've got to keep training hard till next year and try and get it next year. God willing, and I'm still alive, and I'll do it. So we'll see.
And when it comes to the kind of throwing unusual objects, like, what was the first object that really you thought, oh, this is quite fun?
Well, so let me back up a little bit. So I mean, I've always loved throwing things. I mean, in throwing stones. I mean, I hit my dad on the head when he just was walking down the back road. This is when I'm about. This is about how stupid. I mean, young kids are, right? That's probably about 8, 9, 10. He went down the garden. He's going to the shops. He's probably, I can't see him. He's about 3, 4 houses down. I just think he should be about there. So I just throw a stone. And what? So 30 seconds, a minute later, my dad comes walking back down the garden with like blood down his head. And I hit him smack on the head.
Wow.
And I'm like, what? And then I think before that, where I used to live in a semi-detached house, we had a couple of apple trees, and all these apples used to drop on the ground. So I got a bucket of apples, and I was trying to throw the apples over the house. I'm throwing them up, and they're rolling down the roof. And then I got one over. I got so excited, and then I got the next one over. Obviously, I think it's probably my first adrenaline rush. And I just started throwing one after the other over the house. And after about 5, 10 minutes, whatever, and I finished all my mother comes running out, like, what the hell are you doing? And she grabs me and puts me around the front of the house. Everyone on the road was out in the street looking up at the sky, trying to figure out. The whole road was littered in apples hitting cars. And people thought they were coming from the sky. They didn't know where they were coming from. And it was just, so anyway, so I've always thrown things that to me, and I've always done throwing golf balls for arm speed. Again, frowned upon. You shouldn't do that. Just to me, it's kept my arm lively. And
why is it frowned upon?
Because you ask them. I mean, to me, it's something that's not done. It's just to me, why not? I mean, I can anyway. To me, it's helped me, and but going back to which all started the whole thing about throwing objects was. So I've got British national, got world records, kind of, and I've always wanted to throw a golf ball, get an official record. I could never do it in Guinness. I couldn't find where it was, and then I think it was about 2002, 2003 maybe. It's about 20 years ago. I actually looked online on Guinness and found the world record, and it was like 399 feet, or just I don't know what it was, whatever. But I can do that. So it took me 2 attempts. I had to get all these people set up, and had to film weights and measured, spotters, had a surveyor come in, and everything they asked me for. Submitted to Guinness, and then waited. And after about 6 months, 9 months, whatever, I contacted them. And again, one of the requirements was they had to submit all the original material. Because no copies, so I had a file number and everything else, and so I contacted them and they said, well, you need to resubmit your materials. And basically, I think they'd lost it, just whatever. And I'm like, well, I can give you copies, but I can't, give you the originals. And so anyway, they wouldn't validate it. So that kind of festered for a few years. And then with YouTube, and I know at that time, more world records, whatever. And I just said, what does it matter if it's official or not?
Yeah.
If I just start claiming records and just posting on, and that exploded on YouTube. From throwing soccer balls to iPods to just filming it with me and my buddy in the field. I mean, there's nothing official about it whatsoever. And
which one do you think? Which one have people been most excited about?
It really depends. And to me, it's just when I first started going back to when I was working with the British government doing this sports art program. One of the first videos I did was throwing an iPod. I thought it'd be really funny to have a video of me breaking a world record of throwing an iPod that you could watch on your iPod. And also everyone knew what iPod was at that time. And anyway, so I go to one of these schools and all the kids obviously seen the videos. And I remember this one 13, 14-year-old boy asking, excuse me, sir, excuse me. He goes, so he saw your videos? Like, yeah. He goes, why would you throw an iPod? And to me, it goes exactly, it proved my point that, most people don't know what a javelin is. If they haven't seen one, most people haven't felt one. But, everyone knew what an iPod was. And there was a value associated with it.
Mm.
So to me, it's something where it was, beyond what I wanted, where it was, they knew what it was, but why would you throw it? And each one has a different reason. Again, going back to the art of, there's an art to throwing, there's an art to throwing objects, and each object has a different way to throwing. Just like I threw on Channel 4 against Matty Mortimer. We threw his different objects on the airport runway, and he was trying so hard to beat me. He just wasn't thinking about it, and he was just. And the funniest was one when I threw a final record, Baldunican, and he just came up, and I knew that you had to go and throw like a whip, make sure you can't pull across it. These are the old 45 records. We had no one, it was 2 records, and he came up, whacked it, and he just snapped it. It went nowhere, and so everyone's laughing, including his parents. And I knew how to throw it. In theory. And I threw mine, and he went 112 meters. It just, and he had 2 film crews, so he saw it going through the air. And Paul Dickinson, who's my friend, who worked for BBC, was commentating on it. And but it was just so unusual. And then the location and the fact that he was 16, I was 47, wearing my outfits, and just again, it comes back to having fun and thinking outside the box and not getting too full of yourself.
And what would you say has been kind of the most technically hard thing to throw?
I would probably say, even though I've only ever thrown that vinyl record one time, I'd say the vinyl record, because it's something that's so fragile. Or actually, the soft-boiled egg or a raw egg.
A raw egg?
Yeah, well, I actually threw soft-boiled eggs, and people say, well, why soft-boiled? I'm like, well, why not? I mean, people have thrown raw eggs before, but it was like a raw egg. And again, because it's when you hit it, it's how you apply the force, or where it can. We all done that test in school, right? Where it's throwing off 3-4 stories, and how do you create something so it won't break? Because eggs are very strong in the right place, but also very fragile. So I just thought it'd be funny again to have a soft-boiled egg, because no one's ever thrown a soft-boiled egg as far as I know. So whatever I threw, it would be a record or be unofficial. But again, and this is a video on YouTube. But it's I think I threw 3 of them, and I think 2 of them vaporized. as I threw him, there was nothing left. I mean, there was just froth. And then one of them, and this was actually true as far as it was muddy at the other end, actually landed in the mud. I can't remember how far it was, 120 yards maybe. Actually landed and it didn't break. And it just landed, in the, I've done it before with Eddie the Eagle years ago, back in the 80s, at some fete, whatever. And we were throwing, I think we were throwing at him. I think it was afterwards. We're doing the throw and catch record. And the hardest thing wasn't throwing the dig, it was trying to catch it.
Yeah, I've played that
kind of
before.
catch it and swoop around. So
you almost got to cradle it, don't you? Yeah.
Yes. Yep.
And kind of if you look back at your journey, like would you have changed? Do you think, say for example, you hadn't had Spina Bifida, do you think if you had been allowed into, had been selected for those early Olympic teams, do you think you would have ended up where you are now in a similar vein, or do you think actually it's almost formed your passion, your drive, and your playfulness?
Yeah, I think totally. I think it's the, again, basically, our life's journey basically makes us who we are today, right? And just the things that happen today, I won't be the same person tomorrow. Those experiences, and it's about how you absorb them, how you experience them, and to me, it's just a kind of, and that's an ongoing, battle, right? Because we're dealing with, ego, dealing with responsibilities. There's always these other external factors, and to me, it's just about life's journey, and so those, just to be clear, it wasn't Olympics. It was the Commonwealth Games that I was always left out of, and also the first World Championships in '83. But look at it as, again, I mean, the best sort of revenge to me is success, and to me, it's that what happened to me back then is, I sure didn't like going through it, and just I had no regrets. It was just my journey, but to me, it's it's made me who I am today, and it's brought me again from living in America now for over 41 years, and my family and friends, and just just changed my whole life, and that's from throwing a stick.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for coming on and telling your story, which is just inspiring in so many different ways. Actually, if people want to kind of follow your journey, you've mentioned your website where they can buy art. Are there any other channels or kind of outlets that are good for people to kind of reach out to or follow you through?
Yeah, you can go, again, to the website, but I'm also on LinkedIn, Instagram, I guess Twitter, Facebook, and also on YouTube. And I think all those links are on the website. So.
Perfect. Well, any other questions, Jody?
No, I think there is, having got young children, there is something quite human and visceral around just throwing stuff. I can say when you the way that you're talking about it, just saying, well, it just made sense to throw stuff because why wouldn't you? And that's kind of it's I suppose it's just maintaining that kind of that total awe of just seeing what you can do with throwing things. So it's I completely understand why you kind of like still have that passion for it.
Yeah, and I don't know if you've seen this, but I may forward the link, but there's actually an article written by, I think it's some Harvard professor or something, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, about the link. We are as humans who we are because of throwing.
Yeah.
And about the fact that it totally changed the fact that we can become upright, that we start eating meat, and killing animals. So to me, it's just so some part of that that deep prehistoric whatever is within me, and it's kind of bubbling through even at my ever increasing age. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And the good thing is, yeah, those videos on YouTube are going to live on for years and years and years, I'm sure.
oh yeah,
Well, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And we do bad is do a quick Google of Rob, because some of the pictures he's drawn and some of the pictures of his outfits are just sensational. So thank you so much for coming on, and all the best with your future attempts at throwing random stuff.
all right. Well, cheers. Great talking to you guys.
Great speaking to
My
you.
pleasure. Cheers, Rob.
All right. Cheers.
What a legend.
I don't think we've done a throwing stuff episode, have we? I can't think throwing stuff has ever has been a subject matter that we've thought about.
I mean, the thing is, there's like 3-4 different things, like 4 different crazy topics you could talk about that are just, or not crazy topics, just amazing topics. That, his art, his kind of Spina Bifida, they're not being selected, his YouTube channels, the fact he's thrown for so many years, the fact he's represented the US and the UK.
Yeah.
It's just his whole life has just been one amazing kind of journey.
Yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting, isn't it, when that kind of when you have opportunities taken away from you because of mysterious organizations, which
Yeah.
and you know that you are the best, and it's just it's I mean, even however many years on we are now, and it's still relatively mysterious. It's it's opened up a little bit, but being the best doesn't guarantee you entry to anything. If you go against their
against the grain,
and everything is that way. So it's really it's interesting that's still kind of like bubbling up, and he's like he was really proactive about it, like turning up at shit when turning up at shit. It was just like, well, I'm here and I'm going to win this, and there's nothing you can do about it, and to go on, try not to select me on that basis. It doesn't seem like incredibly bitter by it. That's the thing. It just it all seems I think that his attitude is just everything has kind of fallen into place and everything's kind of worked for him and stuff like that. I looked up whether it was South Bank University, Borough Road.
Really? Okay.
Does that ring a bell as to something? It says that there's a sports centre there, but does that come across as as something else that would rival Loughborough as a?
Not that I'm aware of. I mean, because I wouldn't have known. Didn't know South Bank had a university, actually, which is quite surprising given that I live south of the river, not that far from the bank. No, so I don't know whether at some point the grounds were sold off, whether funding changed and the relevance of it, it lost its status or something. But the fact that
Castle.
Maybe it was pulled down then, or interesting.
Yeah.
And you've got to think probably a huge loss, really, to have a Loughborough, to be second only to Loughborough or joint with Loughborough. Loughborough's seen as almost head and shoulders above all other universities of sport now.
Yeah.
So potentially could have changed just the number of great athletes coming through. But it's great that he's clearly channeled his situation into a positive in so many ways. Well, too bad. If you've got any guests that you'd like to suggest coming on the podcast, this Roald was suggested only about 2 weeks ago to us by, I'm just trying to remember who it was. I need to thank them because great suggestion where they just read about him or seen about him and said, let's get him on. So if there's someone similar who you think would be good to get on the podcast, then just message me, David at badboyrun.com. Or if there's any particular sports that are almost do badder in the way people approach them, or topics that you think would be great to get to the core of, then message us. Please do leave reviews if you'd like, and subscribe if you like this episode, because the reviews really help us get the guests on, because it gives us that credibility of being a reasonably sized podcast. Anything to throw into the mix, Jody?
I don't know. I wonder what you were going to say there. It gives us the impression that we're a moderately sized podcast. we are a moderately sized podcast, so the impression's okay.
True. Yeah,
it is true. We're not lying to anyone. No.
It's true. It does reflect the reality.
Before we were. Now we're not. So it's okay.
Indeed. Yeah, stand corrected. Cool. Well, thanks for listening, guys, and we will see you next week.
See you later.
Bye.
Talk to